All right, welcome. So if you're keeping up with AI, there's this one question that just keeps coming up, right? Are these incredible new models actually thinking, or are they just, well, faking it? Today, we're going to dig into a really different way of thinking about all this, moving beyond a simple yes or no.
I mean, you hear this critique all the time, and it's a strong one. We see these things creating art, writing code, having conversations that feel real, but there's this deep skepticism that all kind of boils down to one big, pointed question.
And yep, there it is, that famous term, stochastic parrots. This is the idea that these LLMs are basically just super advanced copycats, statistically mashing up human language without any real understanding behind it. It's a really catchy label, and it sticks. But what if that whole idea just falls apart once these things get big enough?
And that's where the counter-argument comes in. The idea here is that, yeah, maybe the basic mechanism is simple, but something totally different happens when you scale it up massively. At a small scale, it looks like it's just mimicking. But at a huge scale, suddenly, just rearranging patterns starts to look an awful lot like it's actually creating something new.
Okay, so this gets us to the absolute heart of what we're talking about today. Maybe we're all hung up on the wrong question. What if the goal isn't some kind of absolute philosophical truth, but something way more practical? Something like just being good enough to work.
This slide, I think, lays it out perfectly. On one side, you've got this ideal of epistemic completeness. That's the dream, right? Knowing everything, the absolute capital T truth. But on the other side, you have statistical completeness. This is the practical reality. It's not about knowing everything, it's about knowing enough to be incredibly useful. And here's the kicker. Our entire civilization, all of human history, has run on the practical side of this chart, not the ideal one. So, okay, what does it actually mean to know enough? Well, that's what statistical completeness is all about. It's the point where a model has seen so much human language that it can just effortlessly connect different ideas. It doesn't get thrown off when you change the context. And here's the big one. Feeding it more data doesn't really make it any better. You've hit a ceiling. At that point, any information it doesn't have is basically just background noise.
All right, so how does the system even get to that point? How does it become good enough? See, it's not about hitting some perfect score of 100% knowledge. It's about getting reliable enough that you can actually count on it. And this analogy just hits the nail on the head. Think about it. You don't need to understand quantum physics to build a bridge that works. You just need to know enough to make sure your safety margins are solid, so the thing doesn't fall down. And the argument here is that cognition, thinking, works the exact same way. It's not about being perfect. It's about getting your mistake rate low enough that it just doesn't matter anymore.
This actually pulls from a concept in information theory. Imagine all of human knowledge is like a radio signal being broadcast through a bunch of static. As an AI gets better and better at turning into that signal and filtering out the noise, it eventually hits a limit, a point where the signal is as clear as it's ever going to get. Performance just flattens out. Pumping in more data does nothing. And when you're at that point of saturation, it feels like you know everything, even if, technically, you don't.
And this is so important. This shift isn't like flipping a light switch. It's more like a phase transition. Think about water. It gets colder and colder, it's still water, and then boom, at a specific temperature, it becomes ice. It's the same stuff, H2O, but its properties completely change. It becomes solid, stable. That's what happens here. The system suddenly becomes smooth, persuasive, and just dependable.
Okay, I know this all sounds pretty abstract and technical, but what does it actually mean for us, for humans? And why is this whole idea of a good enough intelligence kind of unsettling? Let's get into the human side of all this. And here it is. This is the real gut punch. The reason this idea makes us so uneasy is because it's basically holding up a mirror to how our own brains work. It suggests that a whole lot of what we call thinking or intuition is really just us doing our own version of pattern matching. We're just connecting the dots based on what we've seen before, and then acting with a whole lot of confidence.
And you can see that parallel laid out really clearly here. We humans don't run on absolute truth, not at all. We use mental shortcuts, we rely on trust, we piece together stories that feel right, and we look to other people to confirm we're on the right track. Well, a sufficient LLM works on a pretty similar basis. It's all practical, not philosophical. The bottom line is, neither of us needs perfect, 100% knowledge to get by and be effective in the real world.
And believe me, this has huge consequences for the real world. Because as soon as a system like this is shown to be reliable enough, as soon as its error rate drops below an acceptable level, our big institutions are going to start using it. Think about law, finance, medicine. They don't really care if the AI truly understands something in a deep philosophical way. They care about one thing: does it work reliably? The whole debate about what knowing means, it just becomes background noise compared to the fact that it gets the job done.
All right, let's pull all these threads together now. What happens to all of us when the main question we ask shifts away from, is this true, to something else entirely? And this is where things get really, really provocative.
Now, this is a pretty tough pill to swallow. The argument goes like this. In a world that's just drowning in information, a world powered by these good enough AIs, the really hard, expensive work of finding out what's absolutely true, well, it might just get pushed to the side. We start to care more about what seems plausible, what sounds coherent, and what matches our expectations, simply because it's faster and easier.
So, if is this true isn't the main question anymore, what is? What's the new yardstick we use to decide what's what?
And that's it. That's the pivot, the civilizational shift. It's a move from a standard of truth to a standard of utility. If a tool or an answer from an AI or any system just works, most of the time, that's good enough. We adopt it. It just becomes the new normal.
And that brings us to this final thought, which I think just sums it all up. It really forces you to ask, in your own life, at your job, in society, how often does that last little bit of missing information actually change the final result? And if the answer to that question is not very often, well, then we're already living in a world where being close enough has quietly and maybe permanently become enough.